Hello everyone, welcome to Psychology 101, General Psychology, and today we're going to be talking about cognition. So recently we've been talking about learning and memory and how much of the research on learning and memory has focused on behaviors, trying to avoid digging deep into what's going on inside the brain, because we as researchers can't necessarily get into that. But that is exactly what cognitive psychology and cognitive research attempts to do, to kind of identify these mental activities that are associated with thinking, with knowing, with remembering, and communicating. And we as humans use a lot of different mental tricks, mental abilities, mental concepts to help us get through our daily lives. And we use these oftentimes to simplify our thinking. We frequently try to group things together that are similar in one way, shape, or form, such as objects, events, ideas, or people. We have prototypes of what a specific object should be. So if we think about all the oranges that exist in the world, we have this kind of mental image or idea of what an orange should look like. And we oftentimes, when we encounter an orange or an object in the environment, we can then compare that to what we think an orange should be like and see, all right, close enough, it's probably an orange. So we use a lot of different shortcuts like that, but the shortcuts that we use don't always make us wise. They help more often than not, but they can backfire. So one way in which we use cognition on a daily basis is to solve problems. There are different kind of routes that we can take to try to solve problems. We can try trial and error, just making random guesses to hopefully come up with a solution. We can use step-by-step procedures to find a solution. These can be extremely labor-intensive and time-consuming. And oftentimes we use little shortcuts, and these are known as heuristics. These are simple strategies, simple mental exercises that allow us to make judgments and solve problems much more efficiently and effectively. They kind of keep us from going through every single step-by-step outcome, step-by-step option, and jump to the solutions that are most likely to be correct. Sometimes we can have an insight. This is when the solution just randomly pops into our head. It's often really satisfying to have one of these aha moments. But overall, our tendencies are extremely helpful in helping us solve solutions, but as I mentioned, they can lead us astray. Sometimes we only pay attention to the information that supports our preconceived ideas. So this is what's known as a confirmation bias. So for example, if we're watching a basketball game, we're following our team. If a foul is called, we're going to interpret exactly what happened in ways that confirm to the fact that, well, our team did or did not get fouled. We only look at the information that's going to support how we perceive the world. Sometimes we experience what's known as fixation. We have an ability to see a problem from a different perspective. We're so kind of bunkered down in our one point of view that we can't possibly look at it from a different point of view. And this occurs partially because we oftentimes fall into what's known as a mental set. This is when we tend to approach new problems with the same kind of strategies, problem-solving strategies, as we've solved other problems. A lot of times this can work. So if we use a can opener to open a can, if we encounter another can, that might work. But sometimes we need to approach problems individually. Sometimes a can opener might not work for a specific can if it's not built for it. So we need to be able to kind of be on our toes, think differently, use different points of views and perspectives to come at this new problem. So we use thought to solve problems. We also use thought to make judgments and to make decisions. Oftentimes, we try to make efficient judgments and decisions, so we try to use our intuition as much as possible. We don't try and think too hard about these things. So focusing on using our relatively automatic and immediate feelings or thoughts about a person, about a situation, about a decision that we have to make. A lot of the heuristics that we use fall into this relatively automatic and immediate category. One of these is known as the availability heuristic. So for example, if we want to estimate the likelihood of an event occurring, we might think to ourselves, all right, how easy is it for me to think of an example of this event? So if it's extremely easy, then I might think it's extremely likely that this is the actual case. More often than not, this is a great way of making decisions or making judgments about a situation, but again, it can lead us astray. So for example, if we hear If we read a passage that says Gary likes classical music and likes to drink fine wine, is he a college professor or a truck driver? Well, it's a lot easier for us to think of examples of college professors that might fit that bill rather than truck drivers. What we fail to take into account are base rates. There are many more truck drivers in the world than there are college professors. So technically, it is more likely that that person is a truck driver than it's likely that they are a college professor. But because that description fits college professors more often, we will say that it's much more likely that that person is a college professor. So that's the availability heuristic in a nutshell, and that's an example of the availability heuristic going wrong. We are frequently confident and, to a certain extent, overconfident in our judgments and decisions. We often overestimate how accurate we are in our judgments and our knowledge base. We oftentimes do a bad job of predicting how long it will take us to perform certain tasks in the future. So we overestimate how skilled we will be in the future, how quickly we will be able to complete the task. Sometimes it drives behaviors that can often backfire. So we may be extremely confident that a stock is going to go up. So we buy that stock, and that might lead to the stock actually going down. But we do see that overconfident people tend to be happier. People who have strong positivity towards their own beliefs, towards their own abilities, tend to lead and live happier lives. We also have what's known as belief perseverance. We oftentimes, all of us have beliefs about how the world works, have opinions and attitudes. But sometimes we cling to these attitudes and beliefs even in the face of contrary evidence. Again, you can think about the confirmation bias. We're only going to be focusing on information that coincides with our beliefs, with our specific attitudes. But even when we're presented with information that's relatively mixed, so some information that's pro our argument and against our argument, that should lead us to kind of back down on how strongly we believe in this. But it actually has the opposite effect. We tend to get even more biased in our beliefs compared to previously. So if you strongly believe that the Seahawks are the best football team in the country, and you're presented with mixed evidence, like, well, you won the last Super Bowl, but you didn't win this Super Bowl, that will make their beliefs even stronger rather than kind of pulling them down a notch. The manner in which information is presented to individuals who are making a judgment or a decision can have an extreme impact on how people make these decisions or make these judgments. This is an example of framing. Framing a decision option as negatively valenced or positively valenced can influence whether or not a person chooses that option. So framing and exactly how options are worded, how decisions are worded, how judgments are framed can influence our thoughts and behaviors towards them. And to a certain extent, I've given intuition a bad rap here. It can influence our judgments and decisions in a bad way. It can oftentimes feed into fears that we have, these relatively automatic and immediate fears. It can lead to discrimination and prejudice against other people, as we'll talk about later on in the quarter. But it is more often than not extremely helpful. We have so much information that we have to process on a day-to-day basis. It's impossible to do all of that. And these little tricks, these heuristics, these gut reactions help us navigate our environment on a day-to-day basis. Oftentimes, we're actually better at processing information unconsciously than we're able to consciously. So you may have heard the adage that you should sleep on a decision. Well, that's actually extremely helpful. Allowing our unconscious mind to process the pros and cons of an argument allows us to come to a much better and much more successful decision, a decision that we're more satisfied with the next day. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time and attention. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.